Let's bring her to the stage, Laraine Newman.
Thank you.
Now, Toronto's a city that loves sketch comedy, loves improv.
Well, you have the best, SCTV.
Yeah.
The best. We all know it.
And on stage, we have a founding groundling.
Yes, founding member of the Groundlings. When we were just this dinky little improv workshop in a neighborhood that one of my favorite stand-up comics named Blaine Capatch would say, "This looks like a good place to give up." That was the kind of neighborhood it was, but we went from there.
One of the things that I find interesting with especially people who've done a lot of voice acting is that they find their way to it from any number of different paths. And what led you to want to be a performer in the first place? Everybody starts out wanting to be some kind of a performer. They don't just add water and suddenly become a voice actor. One of the original cast of Saturday Night Live. What was it that made you want to get on a stage, get up in front of people, and perform?
Well, that's a really good question because, some people say I had a dream. I never had a dream. I had my passions and my interests, and I pursued them in that way, and I learned everything I could about the things that were interesting to me, and comedy was my passion. So I had done, improv since I was 15. My sister was also, she was a folk singer, not to brag. And then she was in this workshop. I was at Cal Arts for like 2 minutes, and I realized, I'm not really an actress. This is not quite what it is that I'm comfortable doing. And so she was in this workshop, and she invited me to come to that. And I was not knowing that I would form characters. I think the Valley Girl was the first character I ever did, which was really something I even started forming in high school because I noticed I've always been fascinated by dialects, and I grew up in Westwood Village, which is a college town, and you hear dialects from everywhere. And that also always fascinated me, which has been a great tool for voiceover. But I lost my train of thought. This is going to happen a lot.
Well, following passions and following interests.
Yes. I noticed the way that people speak from the Valley, that because California was settled by the Spanish, and then we had the influx of people from the Dust Bowl that, ing endings would be een, E-E-N, and there was a glottal L, so probably would be prolly, stuff like that. And so in this workshop, in this improv workshop, I started formulating all these characters. And I think Hank Azaria said that some of his characters come out of bad impressions of celebrities. That's me. I qualify as that. So that's really kind of how it came about.
One of the other things that, people know you for Saturday Night Live so directly, but one of the things that I find most fascinating about it is as I understand it, you got Saturday Night Live because you were cast in a Lily Tomlin special. What was it? Lily Tomlin, like you, one of my heroes of comedy, of performance in general. What was it like getting that gig before Saturday Night Live? Forget Saturday Night Live. We'll get to that show in a minute. But what was it like getting that at that time? Because Lily was huge.
Yeah.
Right there.
And I didn't know that Lily and Lorne were in the audience at the Groundlings. I didn't know they were there. Burp. Which was a good thing because I have terrible performance anxiety. But I was thrilled. I didn't even realize what was happening. They wanted the Valley Girl character that I was doing in this Susie sorority sketch, and we had a table read. I had one line, which got a big laugh, which is, "Guy, you guys." And then they gave me a bigger part in the sketch, which was thrilling. But there I met some of the people that would eventually write on Saturday Night Live, Marilyn Miller and Rosie Schuster. Valerie Bromfield was in that special, who is I was telling someone earlier who's kind of like a muse for all of us that do characters. You know, ask Andrea Martin, ask Catherine O'Hara, ask Lily Tomlin. We will all say it's Valerie Bromfield, and who is now a therapist at a university. She just has no ego. She just does what she wants. But she was on that too. She was also on the very first Saturday Night Live and the new talent part that we had. So these were the people on that show that eventually became a part of my life. But you know, the show took hours and hours to film, and we went to like 3 a.m, and Lily was out there entertaining the audience, keeping them going, and I was always like amazed by that kind of energy and just goodness, you know, because it's hard to be in the audience for the taping of a TV show. It's boring and it's long. So my hat was off to her. But I was 22 and I was just thrilled. I just couldn't believe what was happening.
Now, entire books have been written about the early days of Saturday Night Live. One of the things that I find people aren't necessarily aware of is Studio 8H is a lot smaller than people think it is. It is amazing how much show they are able to cram into such a small space, and it's been that way ever since ever. What was it like putting that show together from scratch, from the very beginning? Was there any anticipation that it was going to be popular at all? Was it something that, you know, the success came and kind of took people by surprise?
Well, that sounds like a two-part question in terms of fitting the content into a small theater. I have to say that it's gotten smaller, because when I was there at the Saturday Night Live 40th reunion, a lot of areas that we used for sets are gone. They're completely filled in with stages, you know, to put on makeup and appliances and hair pieces, and, you know, there's very little because they have the technical ability to do all sorts of green screen, etc. We had, when I think about it, we had 5 areas where we could do sketches. Now I only saw 2. So I don't know what's going on with them, but you know, we did have green screen, which was about 2 minutes old when we were doing it. I think the biggest challenge, and what we started to see when we were more successful because we got a bigger budget, was that because of the format of the show, you know, people would pitch ideas to Lauren on Monday. He would say, okay, write this. We go to Tuesday, Wednesday's read through. He chooses the sketches that are going to go into the show. Then they build sets on Thursday. And we do camera blocking on Thursday and Friday and Saturday. So that's, I think, the biggest indication of the difficulty and the miracle of putting that show on in the first place, but also the kind of budget we got to be able to affect that more and more efficiently and quickly.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like when the show took off, when it became this kind of household thing, this thing that a lot of people were watching? You know, were you aware of it early on, or did it hit at a certain point?
I think Gilda and I were aware of it when we would walk down the street the day after, and people would shout out lines to us from the sketches from the night before. That, I think, really, and I know that one day I was walking. I had come from being photographed by Francesco Scavullo, who used to photograph all the Cosmopolitan covers, and I was in the lobby of 30 Rock going to read through, and out of my peripheral vision I see these 2 people, and they come into focus, and it's John Lennon and Yoko Ono. And as they pass in front of me, John goes, "Hi, Laraine." You know, and I'm thinking, he knows who I am. I was like, you know, Lou Costello's,
Well, one of the things I find interesting about your voice acting resume is going back to some of your early credits. There are 2 different iconic studios that you worked with very early on. As I understand, I think your earliest voice acting credit was actually Follow That Bird.
Oh yeah.
With the Sesame People.
Yes. Oh my God.
What was it like working with that group? I mean, every production company that you work with has a different feel, a different energy to it. Every director you work with, I mean, it's kind of like going to a different summer camp. different people have different ways of working things. But what were the Sesame people like?
Well, one of the best things about it was that we did it in Canada. Yes, and it was the kind of thing where the Sesame Street people are fantastic. I mean, they're true believers in the sense that they really do want to support and nurture children. And that kind of ethos is permeated in the way that they approach the work. They treat us very well, although the work was so long and we were so tired that we got to that point of laughing over stupid stuff, and it's like something I still talk to some of those people, and we have, for some reason, that commercial for sausages. To this day, we'll say to each other sausages and we're destroyed. But it's that kind of, you guys know what that's like, that kind of fatigue where it's just everything is funny. But it was a great experience, and Sesame Street is a great, I also did the show too. And it's a great company to work for.
Jumping back to Saturday Night Live for a moment, a lot has been said about the sketches that did make it, but many, many sketches are written that do not make it. Are there any that didn't make the cut for even dress, or made dress but didn't make the final performance of a show that you particularly loved and you wished had made it through?
That's actually a question I've never gotten. I've always gotten, what was your favorite sketch? I'm writing my memoir for Audible.
Oh my, it's almost like we planned this.
I know, I hate saying the word memoir. It makes me feel like the dowager actress with the small dog. I had an affair with Selznick, But I lost my train of thought.
A sketch that didn't make it, a sketch that you dug, that you were into.
The very first show we did with George Carlin, we had a sketch that was Alexander the Great's high school reunion. And it was fantastic. And I wasn't even in it, but it killed me that it was cut, because it was so funny, and that happened a lot.
One of the things that I've recently become aware of is that there were 3 or 4 scripts that were kind of in contention to be made into a feature. One of them was Noble Rot, that I think John co-wrote with
Don Novello, I think.
With Don Novello. Were at the time that things were really cooking with Saturday Night Live, especially when it was, hey, what's going to be the first movie that we try to put into production. Were you a part of any of those groups of people writing those things, putting those together?
No. No, I wasn't.
The reason I ask, kind of knowing where we were going, is the environment was very different in comedy for women then as compared to now, and we are so incredibly lucky to have had you and Gilda and Jane and Lily and these magnificent women who stood up for themselves and stood up for the right side of creativity. What was it like getting told no's that that the guys in the cast would not get?
This is also a question I'm asked a lot, and that didn't happen. We were at an age where the women's movement had begun to happen, so that the privileges that we were getting, we took in stride. We didn't know anything else. Plus the fact that Lorne Michaels was very supportive of women's humor, and the show was a meritocracy. If your sketch was funny, it went in. That's it. It doesn't matter who wrote it, if it's women-centric or whatever. As long as it's funny, it goes in the show. It had no bearing on being told no because you're a woman. That never happened.
Did you experience that elsewhere after being in that environment where it was supportive and it was that kind of a meritocracy?
No, I guess, I don't know if it's the kind of thing where, ingenues may encounter that, but character actors, I don't think, go through that. I could be wrong. Which will be on my tombstone, by the way.
Jumping back to your memoir for a moment.
Yes.
Do we have an approximate window in which people can, pre-order it?
I would say it'll be about a year, because I've had this thing written for 15 years. I've attempted to rewrite 9 times. It's like this piece of paper over here from 3 years ago goes, so I just stick it in a drawer and forget about it. But I finally got this offer from Audible, and I'm working with an editor, so it's a ways off, but all the material's there. It just has to be edited.
jumping back to voiceover, I mentioned one of your early credits. Another one of your early credits, you were in one of the original English voice dubs for a Studio Ghibli movie, Porco Rosso.
Oh yeah. I didn't know what is he talking about? It's an IMDb mistake. I'd like to take credit, but I can't.
The one with the flying pig.
I remember that now.
What was that experience like, matching to voice flaps, approximating dialogue, that sort of thing?
That was nothing compared to working on Ponyo, which, I was like thinking, I'm going to make the difference. I'm going to be the one that doesn't have a stilted sound when dubbing a Japanese show. And you can't, because you have to say this much English in this amount of time. And so it does come out like, oh, young man, why are you in the boat? Come on in the boat. It's just, oh, God, no!
One of the parts of the voice acting process that I think fans may not be as aware of is the role of the voice director. And I know that from just a couple of your credits, you worked with Andrea Romano on Avatar: The Last Airbender, on Superman the Animated Series, whether specific to Andrea, who is a very specific and unique person.
Oh, yes.
What is it that a great voice director can do for you as an actor?
Well, I think the greatest ones have a really vast knowledge of comedy. One of the more current shows I do is Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz with Kari Wahlgren and Tom Kenny, Bill Fagerbakke, Steve Bloom, Jess Harnell. And our director is Mary Elizabeth McGlynn. And her references are so vast in terms of comedy that she is able to really, give us ideas. And even, I'm one of those actors, you can give me a voice reading, I don't care. As long as it's going to make the product better, that's all I'm here for. So she is hilarious. And, she's one of those people like Andrea that makes your performance better.
And Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, if you're a fan of Cowboy Bebop, you might be a fan of it because of her voice direction of the English dub of that. They work on so many productions. It's something that IMDb doesn't do a terribly good job of tracking the actual voice directors on a lot of productions, surprisingly.
Maybe that'll change.
Maybe.
Because it's like events like this that give recognition to things like that, and hopefully, I know that she does quite a bit of cons, so hopefully that'll be more prevalent.
Another iconic studio that you've done quite a bit of work with is Pixar.
Oh, yes.
You were in WALL-E, you were in Cars, you were in both Monsters movies.
Mm-hmm. Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo. What is the environment like at Pixar? What is it like going in for a recording session with them?
They're such a pleasure, and they really, really take a long time with their scripts so that they're just exactly the way they want them. And I remember when we worked on Finding Nemo, the technology to do that visual of light filtering through the water and seeing, the krill or whatever it is in the water was new. So they were really excited about it. It was exciting to be a part of that process. And when we worked on Inside Out, Pete Docter showed us a picture of his daughter, and she was doing this. And he realized that it's like, what is it about adolescence or pre-pubescence that took her away, took my daughter away, took that joyful, happy-go-lucky kid and turned her into this unhappy person? What happens in the brain? And that was, according to him, what gave him the idea for Inside Out, which I thought was brilliantly realized.
You have also done a fair amount of video game voiceover. It is rare that I'm on stage with an actual Darth from the world of Star Wars. What was the process with game voiceover, as I understand it, is very different.
Exhausting.
It's
Yep.
exhausting. It's a lot of times with cartoons, you get to actually do group recording sessions.
Yes.
But in video games, you're just kind of locked in a booth with a giant stack of paper.
Yes, a giant stack of paper,
What was the process
And
working
This will be screams. All these pages will just be screams.
What was, for example, Star Wars: The Old Republic like as a process? There was a certain section of the session that was blocked off for screams toward the end?
Fortunately, yeah, I think they've got it down now. That was really fun. I'd never done a character like the one I did. And, but it was interesting, the whole process of scream like you're being burned by acid, scream like you're being stabbed, scream like you're being shot, scream like you're having the flesh ripped off your face. You know, it's like, how do I differentiate those things? I'm gonna try, you know. That was the biggest thing I noticed about working on that kind of thing.
There's an independent animated feature that you did a voice in called The Battle for Terra. Originally it was titled Terra. A friend of mine actually produced it. And what was it like working on an independent production as opposed to these, you know, Pixar is a big, you know, moving operation, Sesame Street, Studio Ghibli and so on. What was it like working on that show?
Well, I think that the independent productions have the opportunity to be a little more idiosyncratic and specific and a little darker, you know, because it's not trying to appeal to a mass audience. That would be the difference, I would say. Do I remember working on Terra? No, I don't.
That's the thing, is you must have had so many fans come up to you and ask you about very specific episodes and so on. You know, how does something stand out to you in the memory of doing these hours and hours and hours of so many different characters on so many different shows? What are the experiences that do really resonate with you?
The ones where we do work together as a cast. Those are, it's like a radio play. The cast becomes very close. It's familial. The camaraderie is such a beautiful thing and adds so much to the performance. And also, if you're doing a character that you really love, that's something that will help you remember it.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about multi-Academy Award winner Guillermo del Toro, who shot The Shape of Water right here in Toronto. You worked with him on Trollhunters, the follow-up Three Below series in the Arcadia universe. What kind of environment does he create for you as a producer? How hands-on was he? Well,
I did not expect him to be at the recording session. I'm a huge fan of his. And I had listened to him on Chris Hardwick's podcast, and he was, you know, at the end of the podcast, he was listing all the things that he would be doing. And I thought, well, he's going to be too busy to be at this session. He was at the session. So he had 3 characters he wanted me to do. One was a drama teacher, and he says to me, I want her to sound like Miss Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies. And I was so shocked that he knew, you know, his understanding of the idiom of English, American English and culture is astonishing. And, you know, I'm a big horror fan. I wore my Famous Monsters t-shirt with all these monster masks on it, so it was like, my brother. You are my brother, you know, and...
We are family now.
Yes.
I love your shirt. Where did you get it? I need it for my collection.
Exactly. That's a good impression. I know he's a friend of mine.
I've heard a fair amount.
Yeah, it's a fun experience. And also everybody who works, Rodrigo became I cannot remember Rodrigo's last name, but he became the regular director for that and Three Below, and one of the best senses of humor. And again, I think he's either from Spain or Mexico, I'm not sure. But I mean, a complete understanding of American humor. And he actually told me a nice little tidbit. You guys watch The Strain? Okay, so some of those sets were repurposed for The Shape of Water. Isn't that a nice little bit of thing to know? I love knowing that.
Upcycling sets. It's a way to produce green. I've got one more for you, and then I want to turn it over to the audience. I asked you about what it is about the recording sessions, the ones that really stick in your memory. Is there a character that you've gotten to play in live action or in animation or video games or something like that, whether, you know, it was a franchise character that meant something to you earlier in life, or just a particular performance that you relished getting to play with, that really stands out to you, where you really got to have fun with it, where the work wasn't so much like work?
I have to say, as told by Ginger, the mother, Lois Foutley. Does anybody know that show at all? It was a Nickelodeon show. It was like from the 90s, and it was the first animated show really for tweens. And it was funny, but it was also, she was a nurse, you know, and she was a cranky mom, which is what I was. And I just love that character. And I also love playing the Wicked Witch in Wizard of Oz. It's because she had so many levels to her. I mean, she, could be vulnerable if people were nice to her, but then, just a whiff of anything and she would turn, and I love that aspect of the writing.
Do we have questions out here? Oh, right back there.
Okay, so you're going a lot now for your voice work, but it seems at the start of your career you wanted to be a mime. Can you talk about working with Marcel?
You had to bring up the mime.
Can you please talk about mime?
All right. Well, I saw Marcel Marceau at Royce Hall at UCLA, and I was really fascinated that he was getting laughs with no words. So I went backstage and asked him if there was someone in LA I could study with, and he put me together with this guy named Richmond Shepard. And I studied mime with him, but they taught me improv as well. I didn't know I was going to get that, but that was the thing that I really loved. I mean, I loved mime. I loved the discipline of it and the art form and the technique, which is really, really difficult. I ended up studying, I think is the gist of your question, at his school in Paris. And, it's a real science to creating physical illusions. And I just love that, but I cannot tell you how much razzing I got from all my comedian friends. Mime, really? Why you?
More questions? Right there.
I'm just wondering if you still watch Saturday Night Live, and if so, are there any members of the cast that came after you that you'd really love to do a sketch with?
I still watch Saturday Night Live. I love Saturday Night Live. I love sketch work. A lot of groundlings have gone on to do Saturday Night Live, and it's been thrilling for me because I've watched them develop at the groundlings and then go on and do the show and be recognized, which is really gratifying to me because they're all so good. I would like to do a sketch with anybody because I love doing sketches, so I couldn't even pick one person. Yes.
Your career is an amazing career. You've done so much stuff. I have 1,000 questions.
Keep them going, because nobody else has any.
But I love what you said when you said you love dialects earlier. And I was just in Michigan last week, and I was talking with some people from Wisconsin, and I was just fascinated with how their A's are they say happen.
Oh yeah, well Gilda was from Detroit, and and she would talk about she did Godspell with my friend Victor Garber, it's an interesting and Lily's from Detroit too, and I can hear her dialect creep in every once in a while. But when she did what was that law show with Glenn Close? Do you remember that show? I can't think of it. Anybody?
Damages.
Damages. She was on for one season playing this, socialite, like a kind of Bernie Madoff wife. And I believed that she smoked. I believed that she was a rich woman. I believed that she was not gay, I mean, she was just so pristine. It was the first time I ever saw her do anything where you couldn't hear her Detroit accent.
It's so tricky to do that. I was wondering, do you hear a dialect in Canada? Is there a Canadian dialect?
There is, but I can't do it because it's very specific and I wouldn't want to offend anybody by how bad it would be.
We're Canadians, you can't offend us.
Well, I mean, listening to Dan Aykroyd and Lorne Michaels and Rosie Schuster and Valerie Brownfield, yes, there is one. I can't do it. Thank you.
Yeah, what would you give advice-wise for somebody who is starting out in business, really wants to do it, is gung-ho and ready for it, but just not finding the opportunities?
Well, what part of the business would you like to do?
Not
Voice work, sketch work?
Voice work.
Okay. Well, I would watch everything, which I imagine you already do. I would watch everything. And I tell this to people about comedy too. If you have a big knowledge base, you're not going to sound like anybody else because you're going to know what everybody else sounds like. That's what's important. If you have something unique to offer, most of the people who really work all the time, like Tara Strong, Carlos Alazraqui, everybody, Jess Harnell, we all do dialects. We can sound like children, teenagers, old people. You really have to have all those skills. And if you're someone like Frank Welker or D. Bradley Baker, and you can make sound effects, that's really marketable. So if you have that aptitude, I would say cultivate it.
Well, I definitely would.
Well, thank you very much. Yes?
While many artists like yourself cross over into different areas of the medium, which company of fellow artists or actors have you felt that you've really found your own creativity kind of grown and kind of flourished? Is it more like the sketch comedy actors? Is it the voice actors? Is there any difference between the various communities?
There is absolutely a difference between all the disciplines. Voice acting is different, obviously, because you don't have parts of your instrument to work with. Sketch is different than acting. Acting is the thing that I really don't feel comfortable doing. I really feel comfortable doing characters, and so that's why voiceover has really become my main thing, because that's something I really feel comfortable doing and I really feel like I understand. And it has grown me, every time. Sometimes when you audition for a cartoon, they'll show you a picture of the character and they'll give you a description. And that can cause you to come up with a character you've never done before. So that is probably the answer. Your question was which facet has really caused me to grow most, and I would say voiceover. Yeah.
Are there dialects that you sort of chase? Like, is that when you're expanding your own characters and stuff, do you practice one dialect for a long time, or do you just work through different things? How do you grow your own things?
Well, I've done a series of books on tape for my high school friend Amy Efron, who's written Castle in the Mist and Carnival Magic, and I'm trying to think of the newest one, Other Side of the Wall. And there were all sorts of British accents and Welsh accents and Scottish accents and Cockney, so I worked with a dialect coach on that. And on Puss in Boots, I played a Scottish cow. And, doing it around Carlos Alazraqui, whose Scottish dialect is pristine, I was so self-conscious. But I worked also with someone who's from Glasgow, and I would have her record my lines, and I would do it that way. But I also just do it for fun. It's like there are a lot of South Africans in my neighborhood for some reason, and I cannot get that accent consistently, but I'm in my car saying, "Oh, my angel, no, I can't do that." Or I had this South African the guy who made me one of those bite things, night guards, and he took some x-rays. He says, "I can see you take immaculate care of your teeth." And I was like, keep going. But I can't nail it.
Over here.
You said you started out with a level dialect based on bad impressions. What was your bad impression?
Oh, let me think. Well, you know what? The news parader reporter on SNL, Chubby, I'm standing here, I was trying to do Don Pardo. But it was also, I had noticed newscasters had kind of a lot of dialects have a song to them that you can hear and learn. And I noticed that newscasters had an absolute song. And I grew up in LA, and we had people like Jerry Dunphy and George Putnam and all these people, and I learned from that too, but I was also doing a really crummy impression of Don Pardo.
very specific time. It was the mid-late 70s, and I was only 11, 12, 13, and I had to fight to watch it. It's on so late, and there was no internet or anything else, so that was the big thing at the end of the week that you waited all week for. Right? And then you'd talk about it the next several days at school. And much as I love all the rest of Saturday Night Live too, the latest, that's very specific for that reason. So I'm wondering, looking back on your life, how do you personally feel about that era of Saturday Night Live? Like when you look back on Saturday Night Live from that group of seasons?
You know, most people come up to me and say, your cast was the best cast. And my feeling is that they have always had great performers and have always had great writers, and whatever cast was the cast that was on when you were an adolescent, that's the best cast. And it absolutely is the best cast, because they've all been best casts. They've all been great. I mean, I can't think of anybody that wasn't just fantastic. You have to be on that show. I just realized what I was saying about myself. So it was the 70s, you know, I remember it in the context of that and how, you know, what was going on politically and socially, culturally at that time. But insofar as the way I reflect on the cast itself, I mean, their family, that was my college, because I never went to college, and you know, the form of sketch became very different on that show because you had Carol Burnett and Laugh In, which were really valid shows and had some really great stuff on it, but this was very different. And then SCTV evolved sketch to a whole different area, and a much more even sophisticated than our show, with characters. I mean, to have a wraparound show that was in one town was such a brilliant idea. And, you know, and then you have Key and Peele, and you have Mad TV. It's like everybody evolves the form. And I just love seeing that. I am so fascinated and thrilled by that.
We're running short of time, but we got time for anybody got one? I've got one to wrap us up. Go.
Right, so you talked about how you're not an actress, but when they made like sketches into a movie, was that scripted? Was that difficult for you?
Well, I think the only SNL movie I was in was Coneheads. And so I knew that character. I mean, even though I wasn't the character I was on the show, I was the aunt. I knew a Conehead. We actually created the first setup for the Coneheads. Before we started doing the show, Lorne had us doing improv in his loft so the cast could bond. And nothing really came of it. I think we did it twice, but one thing we did was me, Danny and Jane, and Janny and Dane. And we were given an alien family. You know, we just assumed our roles. I came up with the voice, and that was the end of it. Nobody ever thought about it, you know. So, you know, that was the beginning, but then Danny and Tom Davis really made it what it was. But we know those characters, so it's a different thing, and it's not really acting, you know. These characters are cartoons, you know.
You created yourself an issue of a Marvel team-up comic book, Spider-Man and the Not Ready for Primetime Players. How involved were you and the cast with the comic with Marvel?
Oh, we had nothing to do with it. We was like, hey, look at that!
You've signed a few copies of it, I imagine.
Yeah, it's like, gee, this is cool, you know, but we had no idea it was going to happen, and it was really thrilling. Yeah.
We agree with you and ask another question. You've done a lot of TV shows, Laverne and Shirley, Friends, so that was sort of character work. Could you talk a little bit about, you tell a story about the set of like Laverne and Shirley or Friends, or one of these shows that you enjoyed?
Well, I did love doing Friends. Lisa Kudrow's a groundling. It was directed by a guy, Michael Lembeck, who I went to high school with. I was friends with this kid that I had done a play reading with, he was 19, and his name was Grant Heslov, and he became George Clooney's partner, producing partner. So we're on the lot doing Friends, and I'm like waiting to go on, and this was during ER. And George Clooney comes up to me and he goes, I'm a friend of Grant Hesloff's. And I was like, oh, really? Oh, nice to meet you. You know, so cute, you know. Yeah, I mean, that was really fun because these were broad characters. And on Laverne and Shirley, I was doing Sherry, the Valley Girl.
Well, Laraine, we have enjoyed so many of your performances in so many varied genres, even within comedy. What is it that catches your attention? What is it that entertains you? What do you, read for pleasure, watch for pleasure? What do you enjoy? What's fun for you?
Oh my God, I watch so much TV. I love Mindhunter and The Boys. Has anybody seen The Boys on Amazon?
Yeah, they're going to be here tomorrow.
Oh my God, I was just talking to the guy who I think is the agent for some of the actors on the show, and they're in the middle of season 2. God, you know, what do I love? I love seeing new stuff. I mean, I still go see the Groundlings. There used to be this great venue in back of this comic store on Sunset called Meltdown. And, you know, that was a really great place to see new alternative comedy happening.
I mean, that's where you would see Kumail Nanjiani doing his first stand-up gigs.
I know, everybody. But they don't have that anymore. But there's venues everywhere, and both my daughters are comedians because my parents don't have enough to laugh about in heaven. The irony. And the little one is doing especially well, which is a pisser. But I get to see new venues because that's where she's playing. And I mean, you know, they're not kidding. I think it was that show I'm Dying Up Here.
Yeah.
When they were doing it in a deli, you know? I mean, everywhere.
Yeah, I've done stand-up in a coffee shop.
Have you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, you do stand-up?
Here and there.
Oh, cool.
When I can actually get stage time.
Wow.
When I'm not telling bad jokes. I'm here to tell bad jokes and be furniture and worship my heroes.
Oh, you.
So to wrap things up, doing these conventions, I'm sure that you've had experiences talking to fans that they relate experiences they've had, things that your work has meant to them that you couldn't possibly imagine. What's that experience been like for you in receiving, whether it's stories, whether it's thanks for things that you couldn't have possibly known you did for people's lives?
Oh, it's horrible. I love it. You know, Frank Welker do you guys know who Frank Welker is?
How many of you are coming to the Transformers Q&A tomorrow?
Okay. Frank would not do, he and I were on Garfield together. We've done lots of series together, but he wouldn't do conventions. And I said, Frank, I know that you think it's like compliment collecting, that it's somehow you shouldn't do that because it's too, you know, somehow egotistical. You have to let these people love you. You have to let them tell you what you've meant to them. Do it for them, you know? And I can't imagine anything more wonderful than to hear somebody say, your work meant a lot to me. You know, you made me laugh at a difficult time in my life. Or that show, you know, influenced me and made me do this wonderful thing. I love these things. This is my 5th convention, but I think they're just fantastic. I think the people who attend these, and I thank you all for coming, really, I'm grateful to you, and for your intelligent questions. It's a wonderful thing that they have a place where people who do the kind of work that is not instantaneously responded to, because it's TV and film, it's not stage, where you get immediate response. This is a way for us to learn, you know, what our work has affected. So it's wonderful.
Well, a couple little program notes before we blow the roof off this place for Laraine. You've got a photo op coming up. If you haven't already signed up for a photo op, Laraine, go get one of those. You're here the rest of the weekend, yes?
Yeah. Oh, and also watch Los Spookies.
Los Spookies.
Yeah.
What a great show.
Yeah.
This panel brought to you by HBO. HBO,
yeah, exactly.
Home of all of your quality programming. And Frank Welker will be on stage with Peter Cullen tomorrow afternoon. We'll be doing a Q&A with them that we turn over as much of the time as humanly possible to you, the audience. And no two times on stage with these guys has been the same.
Oh my
and
God.
especially because this is the 25th anniversary of Fan Expo Canada, this one's going to be even more special than before. So go to that if you weren't already planning to. Can we get a round of applause for the crew that runs this show, makes things happen? Can we keep it going and just go to 11 on the decibel meter for Laraine Newman, everyone.